Welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about realistic expectations for medical coding job interviews and job assessment tests. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay, guys, so I will start off by saying this. I have done plenty of videos talking about medical coding job interview tips, things to kind of get you to think about when you're about to go in for an interview so that you're not so nervous so that you're prepared. I've even done shows about the questions to ask when you're in a job interview for medical coders, right? So all to set you guys up for success. I've done episodes about the job assessments. Just here recently I did one, but the job assessments, I will say, are kind of difficult to prepare for, okay? And it really all depends on where you are applying, because different healthcare facilities are going to serve different populations of patients. Some are going to serve pediatric patients, some, women's health, and some are for geriatric medicine, some are for sports injuries and emergency medicine. So there's lots of different settings that you could be applying for. So it's sometimes very hard to think of like, okay, well, what do they want here? But as I said in the other video that I did about job assessments and preparing for them, is if you're going to apply at an orthopedic place as a medical coder, then obviously you have to know your musculoskeletal system coding, you have to know about your injury coding, external causes, and joint replacements. All those kinds of things would be very helpful. If you are applying for emergency medicine, same thing, right? Because there's lots of injuries that come into the ER. Also, you have to know about cardio and neuro, because heart attacks and strokes also go into the ER. So there's a lot of things that you should be studying, right? And of course, if you're going with women's health, it's the OBGYN chapter. So there's ways of kind of preparing yourself for these job assessment tests. And knowing your modifiers is also very helpful, because usually when I ask somebody what is modifier 25, I get a deer in the headlights. These are things that are basic that most coders are supposed to already know. So it doesn't matter if you don't have experience yet or not. You're supposed to know these things, because according to the test that you've taken, you've shown competence, okay? And if you don't feel as confident, or if you barely passed, then that means that you still need to do some work on yourself and you still need to practice, okay? It is possible to pass these medical coding certification exams and not really know a lot, because some people are just really good at taking tests, okay? So there's the thing, there's that you got to know right there. Here's the other thing. When you're applying for these jobs and you go to take these job assessment tests, these employers don't owe you anything. I'm going to be very honest with you, and that may seem harsh, but again, guys, I'm not about sugar. I'm going to be as direct with you as possible, because I want y'all to be set up with realistic expectations. They may or may not tell you that you even passed your test. Now, I want to read this post that I saw on social media, and I want to read it because it highlights the fact that people don't know. They just don't know that this is something that is normal in the industry, and that even though, yes, it is normalized, and yes, these things should change, lots of things in the industry should change. The only way that anybody's going to change anything is by really getting out there and being proactive and getting into leadership and that kind of thing, and then being in a position to change. Those are all the only ways you're going to be able to do that, okay? But in the meantime, let's just be realistic about what we are expecting, and not making these assumptions that everybody has to help you, because they don't have to. These employers, you're not hired with them. They don't owe you their time. Time is money in business. Time is money. And the thing about it is, before I get into this message, a company can recover from a money issue. They can always recover from a money issue. What they cannot recover from is time. Time is the big thing that will get companies. And if they waste too much time, then there's too much loss of revenue, there's too much loss of productivity, there's too much loss of everything, and all of a sudden your resources are just wasting away because you're wasting time. Which is why a lot of these employers will not spend a whole lot of time with candidates who are applying. They need somebody who's going to be very direct, very concise. Here's my skills, this is what we've got, and let me give you a test, and okay, here you did really good, okay, now you're in. if you are not passing these assessment tests in medical coding, you are not going to get anywhere. It doesn't matter if you have a degree. It doesn't matter if you used to be a nurse. It doesn't matter if you have some kind of other healthcare experience. It does not matter. If you cannot pass an assessment test in medical coding for that facility or any facility, you are not going to get in. You are not going to get in, and they are not obligated to tell you why, because you are not hired with them. You are not their employee. So let me read this and then we'll get into it. So here we go. The post says, and this is somebody's post on social media, medical coding assessments are broken, and here's why we need change. No feedback, no transparency, and sometimes not even guidelines based. Recently, I completed a medical coding assessment for a company. After finishing, I wasn't able to view my results, passed or failed feedback, or even which questions I got wrong. Later, I was told by the recruiter that I scored a 76, which is considered a fail. I will stop right here real quick and say this. 76 in any normal thing, that's a C, right? However, when you are taking these tests with these employers, their scores are usually 95. You got to pass with the 95%. Some facilities are as low as 90%, but that gets it to be a little scary, okay? So on their test, they say, okay, 95 and above, that's a passing. Some facilities, it's 97%, okay, on their assessment tests for the job, you know, if you're going to apply with them. So that's something that you got to kind of keep in mind. So even though you get a 76, it's still considered a fail. If their passing score is a 95, and let's just say you got a 94, that's still considered a fail because you did not pass according to their standards. So that's something that you have to kind of keep in mind. It is not personal, it is business. Somebody with a 76, in their eyes, needs a lot of work. That's in their eyes, okay? Now, you may disagree. You may say, oh no, I got this, I got that. But this is what they see, and they have their own standard of like, okay, well, we got to make sure that this is correct because we can't just be dismissing people. They're not going to just put together these tests willy-nilly. Hopefully, they're actually looking at something and getting correct answers and things like that. So, and sometimes they use different resources to help them put together these tests with answers. So they're supposed to make sure that these things are verified before, like verified with each other and things like that, before they go and they give these tests to other coders. So that is something to keep in mind. That's something to know going in, all right? But if you do happen to fail when you take one of these assessment tests the first time, and they say, well, you know, you didn't pass, you got an 85, okay? Let's just say you got an 85. And you say, you know what? Thank you for giving me the feedback on that. I really appreciate it. But may I ask, can I have another chance to take this test? I was just really nervous beforehand, but I believe I know what I did wrong. And if I could just have another chance to take this test again. Sometimes they'll tell you yes, sometimes they'll tell you no. It really all depends on the individual. But if they give you another chance to take the test and you do really well, then they'll say, okay, well, that was true. They were just really nervous. But if they say no, it's a no. Okay, you can always apply with them again when they have another job opening because they will have more job openings. But they're not the only game in town. There's other employers out there. So that's something that you got to know right out of the gate. Continuing on. This experience highlighted something I've seen across the industry. Many coding assessments are not transparent. Candidates often don't get feedback or a breakdown of their results. Some tests are not fully aligned with AAPC/AHIMA guidelines, creating confusion and unfair barriers. Let me stop it right there. So the person says some tests are not fully aligned with AAPC/AHIMA guidelines, creating confusion and unfair barriers. The only one of these two is AHIMA that actually has input into the guidelines, the official ICD-10-CM coding guidelines. Now, as far as like, does each association have their own rules about coding? No, they all follow the same code set, the same rules as everybody else, okay? But AHIMA does have a part in ICD-10-CM, okay? They are part of the cooperating parties who help to develop and maintain this code set. So that's something that you have to understand right out of the gate. It is not about, well, this is a HEMA or this is AAPC. No, no, no. Everybody follows the same rules. So let's just not get that confused, okay? The other thing is here where they said many coding assessments are not transparent. So I had responded to this post and I had said, I can tell you why they're not transparent, why they won't tell you exactly which questions you got wrong and what the answers were, is because if you take a test, and let's just say your friend is also looking for a job, and let's just say you passed the test and they give you the answer key and they say, oh yes, you did well, you did this, you did that. Or even if you failed, hey, you got this wrong and here's the answer and this is the breakdown as to why. Well, here's the thing. You could in turn give that answer key to another person. Hey, I'm going to apply. Do you have the answer key? Yeah. So you just have to study these. So then what happens is there's really no way to gauge if somebody's coming in off the street and taking this test and they got 100%. Well, is it legitimately 100% or did they get the answer key off of some Facebook group or some other group that's out there about medical coding? Oh, here's this assessment test that I got from this company and here's the answer key. So that's why they keep their tests very guarded, because they don't want everybody to know what they're testing this person on and what did you get wrong. So it's not, again, they are not obligated to give you the answer. They are not obligated to tell you why or explain to you, because that's time that is taken away from their organization to a stranger that is trying to come in and apply who did not pass the assessment test. So, and then of course she said, well, no, that wasn't what I was talking about. Okay. But I'm just letting you know, along with everybody else, that that's the reason why they keep them well guarded like that, because they don't want those tests to be compromised and the answer keys are out there. So they go on to say, as coders, accuracy and compliance are the foundation of what we do. Yet, when assessment tests lack transparency or proper alignment, it not only impacts job seekers, it also impacts employers who might miss out on skilled professionals. These employers have an obligation to make sure that these tests are correct. If you are not passing the assessment test, they are under no obligation to explain to you why, because you are supposed to already know. That's why I believe companies should, and there's a whole checklist, provide candidates with detailed feedback, ensure assessments are aligned with official coding guidelines, as they should be, foster fairness and accuracy in the hiring process. I'm even willing to volunteer my time to help review assessments, because the goal should be building a stronger, more accurate, and more supportive coding community. Have you ever experienced something similar with coding assessments? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the thing about it is, guys, when it comes to preparing for these job assessment tests, you are going to be given whatever assessment test they put together. Some of these assessment tests are 50 questions. Some are 100 questions. It really all depends. Some are a mix of multiple choice and cases, right? They like redact the patient information and then they'll give you these cases to code, and so they can see what kind of coding that you do, okay? They're going to look at those things. Sometimes when you are going into the interview, they'll make you do the assessment test and you turn the assessment test in, they'll schedule you for an interview. Some will go over the results with you. That's what happened to me. I've gone over an assessment test. I took an assessment test because my friend said, hey, we're hiring, we really need people bad. Okay, cool. So I took the assessment test. I was scheduled for the interview. When I got into the interview, they said, okay, well, you passed, but you missed this and you missed this. And I said, okay, well, which one was that? And so they were like, it's this question, this question. I said, oh, well, actually, according to the guidelines, this, and the third, right? And then according to the other question, that's in Coding Clinic. You can find that in this, whatever. I quoted it, right? And they were like, oh. So I actually didn't get anything wrong, right? And I was actually able to quote why, because they were the ones who shared their answer with me. And I was like, no, there's an updated code about that. There's an updated Coding Clinic about that. And so I was able to explain that to them. So that was how, okay, we worked that out. I ended up leaving that interview because they were like, well, you know, we see, after that they got upset because I guess because I corrected them, right? And it's not to be arrogant or anything. Some people just don't like to be corrected. And in this industry, you can't be that way. You have to be willing to be corrected, and you have to be willing to be told, hey, it's actually this answer. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know about that, or whatever. I do a lot of work with having to look at coding clinic and CPT assistant all the time. So that's how I knew that part, which was good for me, right? But they didn't like it because at the time I had a CCA, the Certified Coding Associate, and they were all CPCs, and they said, "Oh no, would you consider getting a CPC?" Absolutely not. That's what I told her. I say, absolutely not. And I go, because my credential says that I can code for inpatient or outpatient coding. And I am very experienced, but this is clearly not going to be the environment for me if you do not see the value in my CCA. So thank you very much for your time. And so I left that interview. And that's okay. You can do that, especially when you have experience like I do and you have the knowledge base that I do. There's some people that just don't understand these credentials. And you can have a whole string of credentials and not pass these assessment tests, okay? And so you can have one and still not pass. But in the case of the person that was making the post, they were saying that, they would like to see change in that. Well, I get that. I get it. But you're not going to see that. That's not a reality, okay? And you can make a fuss, but until you're in a position to have some kind of authority and leadership, that's never going to change. But then when people are like this and they're very outspoken and they get into those positions, all of a sudden now everything starts to change, and people are going to be expected to know this, and people are going to be expected to know that, because they're in that leadership role, and they're going to understand that, hey, that's why these things are important, because it's not just a personal thing. It's important because we're running out of time. If we don't get these records coded, we're going to get a fine from the insurance, or because it's not going to be timely filing, and we're going to mess up on this, and we're going to get a fine from this. There's a lot of things that can happen because people are not competent. And if you're saying, well, Blue, this scares me because I'm brand new. I don't have any experience. What am I supposed to do? This is why I tell y'all, make sure that you're reading the coding guidelines, the ICD-10 CM coding guidelines, right? You can download them for free. Please don't tell me that, oh, I don't have the book. You can download them for free from CMS. You can go to the Google machine, type in ICD-10 CM Official Coding Guidelines 2025, and you'll see the PDF pop up from CMS. You can download it, and it's totally free, okay? And so that way you can read those coding guidelines and you can know. Because the coding guidelines, whenever I hear a question from a new coder, and usually they're asking some very simple question, this is a guidelines question. Oh, I'm so confused. No, you're not confused. You just haven't read the guidelines, and I can tell, And these are the questions that they're going to ask you in these interviews about. Sometimes it's about basic things, about the coding guidelines. Are you expected to memorize everything? No, but it should be read so many times that it's so familiar to you. Because in these interviews, sometimes it's a panel interview, especially if you're going in person. It's going to be a panel interview where there's going to be like the coding supervisor, sometimes the lead, sometimes a physician champion if they allow that, or if they have the time, or sometimes it might be a physician assistant. Somebody's going to be in there, right, from the medicine side of the house, right? And they're going to be asking you these questions. And the best thing that you can do is not shrink back and be a shrinking violet and say how this is going to be your first job and you're looking for entry level. No one cares at that point. No one cares that you want entry level. No one cares that you want to have your hand held, guys. No one does. And don't get mad. Get ready. Don't get mad. Get ready. Because again, I'm not going to give you guys a bunch of sugar. That's the problem. Everybody's so hopped up on sugar and how, oh, everybody needs to be so sweet. Not everybody's going to be sweet. No one has the time. So that's why I'm telling you, if you're reading your coding guidelines, if you know your modifiers, you're going to be able to answer these questions when these people are asking you. Because sometimes it may be, what is modifier 25? Can you tell me about that? And if you sit there like a deer in the headlights, do you think they're going to hire you? No. They are going to hire the person that's going to be very confident in their response. If they ask you, which modifier would you apply to an evaluation and management of the patients in the post-op? And you're just like, well, is it 59? No, it's not 59, it's 24. So again, those are things that you need to know right off the top of your head. What does HIPAA stand for? I have talked with many hiring managers in medical coding, and one of them said, because I asked him, what is the number one question that you would ask that would make you not hire somebody if they couldn't answer the question? She's like, what does HIPAA stand for? I said, are you serious? She goes, if they cannot answer, what does HIPAA stand for? I don't want you in my hospital. And rightfully so, because that's what we do, is we protect patient health information. And it's 2 A's, not 2 P's. I did the poll. A lot of people were getting it wrong. So I'm just telling you, you have to know what HIPAA stands for. You know, these people are looking for somebody who's going to be ready. They don't care if you miss a question here or there. But for the most part, you need to be as confident as you possibly can be. How do we get confident? We get confident by working with our workbooks. Even though we have our certification, and our certification says that we passed, we need to still be working with our workbooks. So that way everything can start to make sense now. Okay? So that way when you're in there and you're applying, it's not going to be this, oh, well, I didn't pass the assessment test. Right? And if on the assessment test, you know, they have like anatomy, and you know anatomy is not one of your strong suits, you need to be watching videos on YouTube. There's tons of freaking videos on YouTube. Fantastic videos that are not that long. Some are 8 minutes and some are 10 minutes. Crash Course, the Anatomy and Physiology playlist. It's fantastic. You could be listening to that while you're brushing your teeth, while you're cooking dinner. You could be listening to it. There's lots of ways to help yourself, guys. Okay? But again, to round out this video, I will say that when you're preparing for this interview, you need to go in there as confident as possible. You may not feel the most confident, but you need to show that you are confident. Because again, if you are not showing that you're confident, I'm not going to want you either. I want somebody who's going to be ready, and who even if you say, okay, well, if you're doing this interview virtually, right? You're doing this interview virtually, you better be backed up against a wall so that they don't see all the things that are going on in your house. It needs to be quiet. You don't need to have dogs barking or a cat walking across. That's not cute. That's not cute. It's annoying, okay? And especially because when you are in these interviews and you're doing this virtually, everything changes, right? The tempo of your voice changes, and all of these things change. Everything's a little bit more lower. So that's why you have to make sure that you pump up your voice and that you are just as engaged. You're looking at the camera lens, not at yourself, because there's a huge difference looking at yourself like I am right now versus looking right at the camera lens. You want to make sure that you're engaged with them, okay? And you're looking at each and every single person. And even if you're nervous, these people are here to interview you. This is a business, okay? This is not personal. This is a business. And if you are so wrapped up in your head that, you know, oh, I can't, then your body can be like, yeah, sure, okay, we can. Instead of just believing in yourself. You've done all this hard work. You can do this, okay? But again, don't expect to get any feedback from these employers. If they give it to you, it's a gift. It's a gift. But if they don't, it's okay. Just think back to what was on that test, if you can, and say, okay, well, you know, there's this question, and I know I could look up this scenario again, or this is where some of my weaknesses are. That's what you need to be doing. But let's apply common sense when we are applying at these different places, because if you know that cardio was not your strong suit and you go and apply at a cardio place and you fail your test, that's not a surprise, right? It's not a surprise because you weren't really strong in it to begin with. So what should we do to prepare if we're going to go in for an assessment test for a cardio clinic? We need to be reviewing the cardio guidelines. We need to be looking over the CPT section for cardio. We need to be looking over the American Heart Association website so that we can better understand the heart and the anatomy of the heart. Those are things we can do to help ourselves to be able to get our first job. No, you do not have to go into these places like that you see on LinkedIn that they're always constantly hiring all the time, or even you don't even have to pursue an HCC position. Everybody says, oh, I thought I had to pursue an HCC position, risk adjustment, hierarchical condition category coding. You don't have to. you are just as eligible as anybody else to apply for places that are looking for medical coders, even if they're asking for experience. Because even though they say, oh, we want 3 to 5 years experience, they do this to weed out the people that are going to see that and run the other way, because they don't want to have to train you. However, if you are studying like you're supposed to, right? Like I tell y'all to all the time, but if you study like you're supposed to, and you say, you know what, it's free to apply, isn't it? Okay, well, here's my resume. Oh, your resume looks fantastic. It's on 1 page. It's right to the point. It's all concise. This looks good. So let's go ahead and give you an assessment test. Let's see what you got. And then you do your assessment test and you pass that assessment test. Guess who's moving on to the next round? But not the person who's out there getting scared. Well, they said 3 to 5 years. Who cares? Are they going to charge you to apply for their company? No. You're applying for a job just like everybody else. You have skills and your skills are brand new. Okay? So that's something that you have to know. But again, I will say this, and to wrap it up. These companies do not owe you. Don't act like they do. And don't complain because they don't give you feedback. If you want to change the system, then you get into leadership and you do what you need to do to change the system, to change for your facility. But then I'm sure that you'll see that there's a reason for it. What could be done about it? What could be done about it is a little bit more regulation on some of these schools that are out here pumping out people who are not qualified and taking these tests because they've taught them how to pass assessment tests. That should be done away with. But it's not, because anybody could take these tests. You don't have to go through a formal program. But I feel like if you're saying, hey, we have a formal program here, it doesn't need to be somebody who's a program that's pumping out people and they're incompetent because they're not able to do anything but pass a test that's a multiple choice test. Because they were taught how to pass a test. I'm just saying. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But just something to be realistic about, guys. They're not going to hold your hand. If they give you feedback, great. If they don't, it's okay. It's part of the process. But prepare yourself. And when you're preparing yourself and you see that you say, okay, well, I got a 76 at this place. But maybe if I go over here, oh, and it's in a subject that I like a little bit better, like maybe you really like PT and OT, okay? And you did really good on the assessment test over there. You got like a 94. Okay, great. You know, maybe they have a 90 passing score. You passed over there, but you didn't pass over here because the complexity of what all is going on over here, and they need you to be a little bit more advanced. That's something that you can use for your own potential so that you can start growing that way. We need to start looking at the facts. What are the facts? What is in front of us? Okay? We're being told that we're not doing it well. What are we not doing well so that we can go back to it? We can find a mentor who can specifically help us with this. Mentor will help you for free. If you need a tutor, then you need to go and look and hire somebody to be a tutor for you. You can make a post on LinkedIn and ask, does anybody have any tutor recommendations? And there will be a bunch of people who will tell you who they recommend and who they don't recommend. I am a tutor myself. My rate and contact is in the description box below. I also write resumes too. Rate and contact is in the description box below. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Best of luck to you guys out there. Don't get lost and focused on your feelings and how this whole system's broken. System's not broken. It's this way for a reason, okay? I'm just saying. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.